the Holy Grail web design layout, web layout. Um, Here it is. It's a bit blurry of an image, and it does vary. For example, here is another one. Um, what is this? This is kind of the be-all and end-all of web design layouts. The essence being that every website kind of follows this pattern, um, but styles change, patterns change throughout the years, and which was once in style may not necessarily be in style 5 years from now. So the general consensus is that every website kind of looks somewhat like this. You've got a header at the top of your website. So this is kind of like a nice logo or a nice picture. You've got links, to your website, stuff like that. You've kind of got the main body of the website denoted with article. Then you've kind of got a smaller column called aside. And there's some things that you can put in there, some more links or descriptions and stuff like that. And then you have a footer at the bottom of your website, usually containing, could be legal information, could be contact information, copyright information, more, legal jargon, stuff like that. It's not hard to see every website kind of following this trend. So for example, I don't know, let's go on some websites. So this website, for example, clear header, logo, some links, not necessarily split into two pieces, almost split into three pieces, 3 column-esque, kind of with different articles. So that's a little different. But here is the footer. So we've got a newsletter subscription. We've got, copyright stuff, who it was designed by, more links. Second website. So a bit of a smaller header. Every website has a header. Every website worth its salt has a header. Logo, some more links, stuff like that, some drop downs. This does a good job of doing the article and the aside kind of body split up. You can see this would be kind of the aside, and this was kind of the body, or sorry, the article, I should say. It doesn't have to be clear cut, but you can kind of see how this is kind of split up into 2 columns. And scrolling down, the entire website doesn't necessarily need to be like that, but scrolling down, we get the footer, and there's a lot of legal stuff for this website. So every website doesn't have to follow this, but it's a good start. It's a good starting point. And I don't know, it's kind of a good idea to check out some websites yourself. Here's a website with a lot of them. Header, kind of 2 columns, words, descriptions, just pictures on the other side. I'm sure there's a footer down there. Header, 2 columns. Of course, this is some type of merchandise website, so different types of websites are going to be laid out differently. I see a lot of websites just doing one big body. That's pretty common nowadays. Here's a nice 2-columner. Here's your article. Here's your aside. Here's another one body website, header, one body, probably footer down there. Header, article, aside. And styles change. So it's, what looks good now is probably not going to look good in 10 years from now as things change. Anyways, enough yapping. Let's kind of get this general layout started. So we can split this up using divs. So for example, everyone should be able to make the header of a website, or at least make a div that acts as the header. However, I'm not going to call this a div because HTML has certain words that I can use that behave exactly like divs. But I just don't have to use div and give an ID. It just makes my life easier. Here's the list of words that you can use. These will all act as divs, except You don't have to call them divs. They have their own name. That's why I like this particular layout. So bear with me here. So I'm going to create a div, except I'm just going to use the word header. I'm going to use a header tag. And it acts the exact same. Well, as far as we're concerned, it acts the exact same. So here's a div. I'm going to style my div, which is denoted with header. Divs span the entire web page, so I don't need to worry about that, but I will give it some height. So let's give it a 200 pixel height. And can I see my div yet? No, I cannot. So let's give it a background color. Yeah, I'll show you a cool little trick. This is a picture. I can snipe this color from this picture using my little eyedropper tool. So I'm going to click here, copy the hex code, go to my code, and hashtag paste the hex code. There is the header of my website. And maybe it's just a bit too big. Let's narrow it down. So really this is just a div that takes up the top of my website, which adheres to these HTML or these web design, these holy grail layouts. I'm not interested in nav right now. Let's just worry about article and aside. Let's just pretend that doesn't exist. All right. Aside is a section. It's a bit skinnier. It definitely does not span the entire width of my web page. So let's code that. So I'm going to create another div, except HTML allows me to use the aside tag to do this. And I'm going to style this div, aside div. This div is a bit bigger, so I'm going to give it a height of 600 pixels. And let's give it a background color. I liked this color, so I'm going to use the yellow one. Snipe that. Background color, hashtag bloop. And I should probably save my documents. And there is my div, my second div. Now it's spanning the entire website because it's a div and divs do that. I don't want it to. I just want it to be, you know, just that big. I need two divs in here. This one's clearly wider than this one, so thankfully I can change that. So width, I don't know, let's go 200 pixels for now. That's maybe a bit too small. 300 pixels. Yeah, let's make it a little bit bigger. 400 pixels. Sure. All right. The third section, I have deleted the nav section up there because we don't need to worry about that, is an article, which is going to go right beside that div. So let's create a new div. I'm just going to call it article. And this div should be the same height as my aside div, right? Or otherwise it could look a bit funky. Background color. Well, I really liked this color, so I'm going to snipe that hex code. Hashtag it in. And save my stuff so I can see everything. And this div is down on the bottom. And we've ran into this problem before because divs are block elements. They hog the entire line. They don't like to share the entire line. So what I can do is I can use my beautiful float property on my yellow div. So if I put the floats to the left, that is saying, hey, all other elements, you can float around me. Please float around me. Now everything looks all fine and dandy, but there's one small issue. These divs are overlapping each other. So for example, if I set the width of my green div to be the exact same as my yellow div, it looks like it's disappeared, but really they're overlapping each other. So if you still don't believe me, if I make it 500 pixels, you can see it starts to stick out. I don't want them overlapping. I want them side by side. So that's when I hit them with a display inline block. I want them to behave as inline block elements, like images. Sharing that space, but not overlapping each other. And now they're beside each other. And if you really don't believe me, I can give my yellow div 20 pixel margin to the right, and it's going to push it 20 pixels away. So something to watch out for, something that you may have not picked up on. But now these divs are right beside each other. I'm going to set the width to be, well, 1,000 pixels. Heck, let's do 1,200 pixels. Now I'm playing this guessing game because this header is spanning the entire width of my website. In other words, it's spanning 100% of the width of my website. So it's going to be pretty hard for me to play this guessing game where I have to find out values that I don't know how many pixels wide my website is. So some of you have already done this. Instead of setting my height to be a defined set of pixels, you can use percents. So for example, in this layout here, I think it's safe to say that this div spans about, I don't know, 25% of my web page, which would mean this div spans about 75%, because my header spans 100% clearly, and 25 plus 75 is 100. So what I could do is I could say 25% of my web page, oh, I'm working on the height, my bad. 25% of the width is taken up by my yellow div, and I want 75% the rest of the website taken up by my green div. And now everything lines nicely. And we might run into some issues here, but we'll fix those in the future later on in the course. But you can see it maintains that ratio. Finally, we have the last div, that is the footer. So in my HTML, I can use the footer tag. And this one is fairly easy. Footer. How big do I want my footer to be? I don't know. Let's make it as big as the header. Background color, I'm getting lazy. I'm just going to pick a nice color. Make sure my stuff is saved. And there we have the footer. Now, for housekeeping, remember, we're floating to the left, which means everything is going to float around this yellow div. I don't want to float around it anymore. I wanted my green div to float, but I don't want any funny business happening with this blue div. I want it to be under. I don't want it to float around the yellow. So it might be a good idea to clear both sides. And that's just going to kind of make sure that there's no funny business, that this element, this div is really trying not to float around this yellow one. And that anything following it is going to clear this float to the left property. Yes. All right. So now you could put things in these divs to kind of replicate, you know, what you see on these websites. And you can change these heights and these widths and these, you can change all those sizes to how you'd like them. But yeah, there you go. That is the basic HTML layout using divs as semantic tags.